Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking some pretty dense linguistic rules and turning them into a practical masterclass on everyday communication. Have you ever wondered why a simple question can sometimes rub people the completely wrong way? Or why some conversations just seem to hit a brick wall? Well, today, we're going to decode the hidden mechanics of exactly how we talk to each other.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We're covering 1. Politeness in asking questions. 2. Mastering personal conversations. 3. Telephone etiquette and manners. 4. Navigating services and procedures. And finally, 5. The art of listening. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. Politeness in asking questions. Now, we're starting here just to establish why politeness actually matters. It's really not about following strict grammatical rules or trying to sound fancy. Functionally, it's about not putting off the person you're speaking to, right? You want to actually get the info you need. So I want you to genuinely ask yourself, are your questions secretly pushing people away? Think about it for a second. Curt or abrupt ways of asking for things might literally be preventing you from getting the helpful responses you want. Direct questions usually kick off with W words. You know, what, where, when, why, and how. And depending on who you're talking to, that basic form can honestly feel a bit like an attack. Think of a raw, direct inquiry like an abrasive shock. It's like suddenly walking up and asking, "What are you busy at, Laxman?" It just lands heavily, doesn't it? But look at how we can soften that approach. It's like offering a gentle cushion. So instead of demanding, "Are you Captain Hagbird?" couching it as a conjecture by saying, "You must be Captain Hagbird, I believe." Man, that just makes it feel so much softer and more approachable.
Moving right along to Section 2, Mastering Personal Conversations. Let's see how this builds into our daily personal chats. This is an arena where directness can super easily feel like an interrogation, especially if we're dealing with acquaintances or total strangers.
For instance, it's actually not quite polite to ask someone their name directly. If you just walk up and say, "What is your name?" it sounds incredibly demanding. We really need specific linguistic tools to navigate these personal inquiries gracefully, so we don't end up sounding rude by accident.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how just using modal verbs can instantly soften that heavy blow. By framing it as, "Could I know your name, please?" or "May I know your name, please?" you instantly change a demand into a polite request. Or actually, you can simply say, "Your name, please," but with a rising tone at the end. That rising intonation turns a tiny fragment into a perfectly polite question.
Let's slow things down a beat, because inquiring about a personal bereavement is obviously highly sensitive. When you're offering condolences, direct questions like, "How did he die?" are just incredibly abrasive. You want to avoid that entirely. Instead, try using gentle statements like, "Your mother must be inconsolable," or "I can understand how painful it must be." It's just a far better way to offer comfort. It naturally invites a response from the grieving person without backing them into a corner with an interrogation.
All right, Section 3, Telephone Etiquette and Manners. We're shifting environments now to the telephone. And this is a fascinating space, right? Because it's completely devoid of visual cues. You don't have body language or eye contact to soften your words, which means your verbal etiquette becomes absolutely critical.
So let me ask you, do you ever sound rude on the phone without even realizing it? Let's look at some standard phone courtesies. When you receive a call, saying, "J-Rom speaking," instantly identifies you. Boom, done. When making a call, stating, "Hello, this is Prakash," before asking for Mr. Madhukar is essential. Honestly, failing to identify yourself is one of the quickest ways to start a call off on the totally wrong foot.
And identifying yourself is really just the tip of the iceberg. Even with perfectly good intentions, a lot of people fall into some genuinely terrible habits when making or receiving calls, turning a really simple tool into a total nuisance. I mean, we've all been there, right? People who flat out refuse to believe they've dialed the wrong number and actually try to argue with you about it, or the folks trying to hold a full conversation while chewing pan or a mouthful of food, and of course, the absolute public menace, people speaking so unnecessarily loudly on their cell phones that the entire room knows their business. The telephone is literally designed to pick up your voice at a low volume. Shouting does not help you be understood better than just speaking clearly.
Moving on to Section 4, Navigating Services and Procedures. So the crucial takeaway here is applying these manners to the real world, way beyond just small talk. This becomes incredibly important when we need to ask for help with a service, gather details, or figure out a brand new procedure from an expert. Let's say you're looking for info on studying abroad. Sure, you could use the most basic form, "I want to know." But when you're speaking to a service provider or an acquaintance, we really want to upgrade that.
Changing it to a polite modification, something like, "I wonder if you could help me in this," or "Would you be able to tell me?" completely transforms a demanding statement into a nice collaborative request.
And on the flip side, when someone is answering those polite requests, say explaining the procedure for building a terrarium, notice how that information actually has to be presented. You don't just dump all the facts at once. You logically chunk it step by step. First the layer of gravel, then the soil mix, then the plants. Clarifying procedural information bit by bit ensures the listener isn't completely overwhelmed.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 5, the art of listening. This is kind of the climax of our whole narrative. We have to flip the script entirely, because communication isn't just about how politely you ask or explain things. It is equally about how actively and effectively you receive that information. To understand why listening is so hard, think about the contrast. In writing, sentences are perfectly clear and distinct. We can easily read, "Mrs. Gandhi went to Parliament at once." But in fast, unscripted, everyday speech, words run together into tangled mess. It sounds a lot more like, "Ms. Gandhi went to Parliament at once." Sounds get completely left out or just become totally unclear.
What usually gets lost in that mess are the unstressed words. These are the little words, the prepositions, the auxiliary verbs. The content words, like your nouns and verbs, stay strong, but the little connectors just vanish. And if English isn't your strongest language, this becomes a massive hurdle. You're forced to rely heavily on your knowledge of the overall context just to guess the meaning of what's being said.
And, guessing from context can sometimes lead to some absolutely hilarious results. The linguist Victoria Fromkin actually wrote about these slips of the ear. In one fantastic example, a speaker said, "My friend Shanty," but the listener, trying desperately to piece the sounds together, heard, "Your French auntie? I didn't know you had a French auntie." It's such a perfect, relatable example of how our brains try, and sometimes completely fail, to make sense of spoken language.
Now, let's put it all together in the ultimate test. Imagine you're a tourist, and you're politely asking a hotel executive for directions to the Langtang track. First, you have to ask politely to get their willing help. And then, you have to actively listen to catch all those vital details. Taking a bus to Dunche, a 120-kilometer drive, the location of the modern lodges, and the specific route to Barku. If you don't listen through those unstressed words, you are literally going to end up lost in the mountains.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Are you actively listening, deciphering the context, and engaging politely with the world? Or are you just waiting for your turn to speak?